Today's sermonette is on meditation. The title you would write down, a very simple one, meditation. Pick an area it helps. I'm going to give you some areas to look at in terms of when you want to meditate, areas to look at within Scripture, and it should hopefully be some helpful hints. I'll even comment a little on what helps me and where I'm still trying to learn some things myself. Now, we'll start with the definition. Merriam-Webster's has got down meditation to focus one's thoughts, to reflect on or ponder over. Now, for the purpose of this sermonette, you have to be mindful of time and use it wisely. I'm only going to focus pretty much on the Old Testament. There's two words I'm going to focus on, and you can write them down and look them up later. You have Strong's H1897, called Haga, is pronounced Haga. It means to muse within oneself. It also includes words like murmuring and pondering and thinking, like speaking over a topic. And believe it or not, it also includes little sub-meanings like growl, groan, meditate, devise, muse, and imagine. And depending on the context is how the word is translated. And the other word I'll be looking at is going to be Strong's H7878, which is siah, which is to muse, talk, and complain. So God packs a lot of meaning in Hebrew. I'm going to look at five areas that you would look at, and there's probably way more than that, but I'll give you five solid areas to think about for meditation. And again, just for this sermonette, we have to stick to the Old Testament. Now, number one, first area, God's deliverance. Now let's turn, we're not going to turn to too many scriptures, turn to Psalm 63, and there's a reason for this. Psalm 63 is a very interesting psalm, a psalm of David. He wrote it while he was in the wilderness of Judea. Now, historians are debating the context of this psalm because they're not sure, is he in the wilderness running from Saul, or was it written later after he went through all of that and he was king and he was running from his rebellious son Absalom, who was going to overthrow the kingdom and kill him. But he remembers that God was his help because he was delivered multiple times. Let's focus on verses 5 and 6. Psalm 63, and this is all within the one area, deliverance. My soul shall be satisfied as with marrow and fatness, and my mouth shall praise you with joyful lips. When I remember you upon my bed and meditate on you in the night watches. And he talks in verse 7 how he's been his help. He's been protected. You could look at the rest of the chapter. Again, David is in the wilderness. So when we meditate, are we in the wilderness? Is there an area of life that's really difficult? Do I have a job where I'm about to be fired? Is my child sick? Whatever it is, a hostile neighbor or hostile other people, or our family is persecuting me because of church. And I admit myself that there are other areas that I'm stronger in meditation, but in this area I still have to do better. Because when you look at deliverance, you want to step back and think, wait a minute, how has God reached into my life and delivered me? How has it been? I could tell you a quick story about me. I was on the Jersey City waterfront, and a tornado came to our warehouse, and at the last minute it branched off and hit the other warehouse. And I wasn't nowhere near the church or anything, so I don't know even then. And how many of you? Could have been a storm, could have been an accident, could have been an illness, who knows? Think of deliverance. That's area one. Now, let's look at area two. We already know God's deliverance is one. Area two, God's power. Now, this bears witness of God and his greatness in works. Let's turn, we're going to turn here, let's turn to Psalm 77 and verse 12. Psalm 77 and verse 12. I will meditate also of your work and talk of your doings. Now, for the first two areas, we're still using that same word, Strong's 1897. I will meditate of your work and your doings. Now, in this area, okay, I'm a little better at it, but focus on creation. Creation and the orderliness of the planet, the biology, the physics of the universe, the planets, everything. God's works lay it all out. Now, I'll just throw a quick example. It's just popping in my head. Plants and animals, right? Planet Earth, here it is. God creates it. Do you know that we have to breathe in what plants give out, which is oxygen? Plants have to breathe in what we give out, which is carbon dioxide. Literally, one suffocates without the other. And so God had to lay this out, how many animals and how many plants on the world to balance carbon dioxide and oxygen. Just things like that. Because I like to dig my nose in science, it helps me, but this is the area of God's power. It can be his creation, it can be how he orders things. That's number 2. Now, let's look at number 3, God's law. Now, God's law is very interesting. We'll get to a little bit of that in number 5, but in number 3, God's law itself. Have some interesting background comments out here in the audience. I propose any of you that have a chance, please take a look at Psalm 119 later. That is 22 stanzas, each stanza matching a Hebrew letter, 22 stanzas that magnify God's law. It's a huge, I believe it's the largest one in Psalms. Psalm 119, okay, Psalm 119. And what's very interesting is this one has 6 verses. Where you meditate on precepts, on statutes, and word. Now, why would this be an area to meditate on? Well, when we look at our society and we look at the elections, whatever political party is not even the point. The point is God's law makes for a much better world and a much better society. And when you have parts of, and it can be this country, it can be Europe, Asia, Africa, doesn't matter. Anywhere around the world, the further away a nation gets from God's law and righteousness, the more dangerous a place it's going to be. And even a place that can be very physically, technically advanced, okay, we got a large communist nation over there in Asia, still a very difficult place. Without God's law, it's going to be a very miserable place, and it will eventually fail. God's law makes for a stronger, better society, family, safety, all of that. And I'm just starting to learn more about this one because I've started to dig into why certain cities had different elections and why they elected different mayors and all of that. When you hear the term defund the police, your antenna should go up because law and order is extremely important. Scripture talks about how a wise king scatters the wicked. You want good, strong government that keeps safety and peace. No matter what political persuasion, no matter what election, any of that, God's law makes for a much better, safer world. Certainly a world to raise children, a world to be able to go to work and enjoy the fruits of your labor. So that's number 3 area, God's law. Now let's let's look at the 4th area an area I'm going to pick. This one I have some personal feelings about, God's wisdom. Now I propose this as a suggestion. We can take the Proverbs, for example, and look up the difference between the foolish and the wise. In fact, Scripture says God by wisdom forms the worlds. Note that Proverbs itself is meant to give knowledge to the simple. And, for example, it's obvious for me, if any of you saw my sermonette I gave months and months back, talked about what I was when I was a teenager, and the image that said a companion of fools will be destroyed. You want to be with the wise, not fools. And I was going down the wrong road, and I had to learn that the hard way. But just studying Proverbs and looking up what is a fool, what does a fool do? By learning about what fools are, and he's just meditating on that, teaches me, oh, I shouldn't be this. What does a fool do? Fool opens his mouth, doesn't think. A fool starts problems. A fool argues. A fool is quick to anger and stirs up strife. Oops, I don't want to be those things. Wisdom is getting away from foolishness. And that's just one area of God's way to look at. Look for wisdom and meditate on that. Finally, we're going to get to the fifth area. And the fifth area is we are going to turn here. Let's turn, and this is a curious one. It's not what you think. It's Joshua. Joshua, chapter 1. It's a verse we know very well, but let's ponder this one. Joshua 1, verse 8. This book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth, but you shall meditate therein day and night. You may observe to do all that is written. Then you shall make your way prosperous, and then you shall have good success. What's very curious about this area is God is giving advice to a nation of former enslaved people that have just fled Egypt. They've been wandering in the desert. They're about to go up against nations that God says are greater and mightier than you, and they never were an army. They never were trained to be an army. They were whipped and enslaved, and they're going to go and conquer Canaan. Okay? So what God is saying here is he's not telling them, oh, I'm going to teach you how to make better swords. Use sharper iron, not so brittle, stronger. No, he doesn't say, oh, build better shields or learn how to make chariots to run down the enemy. God doesn't say those things. What God is saying, you will have success. You meditate on the law. There's a much bigger picture on this. When you look at the blessings and cursings chapters, I'm thinking about this area 5 is righteousness builds a great nation. And when you look at the two chapters, blessings and cursings, Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28, where literally God is promising Israel, if you do all these things, I'll be with you. You won't have enemies. They'll run from you. The world will be afraid of you. But they'll also be looking at you saying, wow, these people are so brilliant. How can we be like them? I wish we could be like them. How do they do it? They have all this blessing, and they're powerful, and they're rich, and they're everything. God's actually making a promise that filling our mind with right thinking, the laws of God, and all these things for the fifth area is going to make a great, mighty, and powerful nation. And we have proof of that. Solomon. For a brief period of time before Solomon went off chasing pagan wives and running and disobeying God, Israel was so rich and powerful. You can read those chapters. Every man was prosperous. And the land was rich. There was gold and silver in abundance, and it was all kinds of food and trade and everything. Everything worked when man obeyed God. It was a perfect example. Too bad it didn't stay that way. As we all know, it didn't. So to step back, to wind this up, you had 5 areas to look at when it comes to meditation. Think on God's deliverance, like David did. He had to run for his life. Think on God's power. Look at his creation. Think on his law. It's perfect. Think on God's wisdom. Well, the whole world needs more of that. And then finally, think on God's plan. He gave a promise to the blessings and cursings to Israel, and look at what could have been, or for a brief period, a brief slice, what was. And I will now say, happy Sabbath to all.